بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Peace and love, beautiful people. I'm Brother Ali. This is the Travelers Podcast. Thank you for being here. I'm recording this at about 11 o'clock at night in New York because I'm on the East Coast leg of the Travelers Tour. For the last 20 years, the part of the world that knows me has known me because I write and record and travel and perform music. It's been almost exactly 20 years since in 2002, BK1, the producer of this podcast, who was my DJ at that time, we rolled out on what for us was a monumental tour because the group that we were opening for released what was for them a monumental album in our particular cohort of underground independent hip hop music. Back in 2002, Atmosphere dropped this album called God Loves Ugly. And so we rolled out on that tour with them. It was like 65 shows in a really short period of time. We had shows every single day with very few exceptions. Every now and then we'd have a Monday off so that we could wash our clothes and go to the movies and relax. But for the most part, we did shows every single day. And that tour is really what started it for me. Not long after that, I released my debut album, which is called Shadows on the Sun. And ever since then, that's what we've done. And the people that have supported us, there was a particular cycle and a pattern that we had. We make an album and then we spend months preparing people for it, getting ready for it with this big, long pre-order. And we release tracks and things like that for people to get ready for the album we're about to release. Might do music videos. Then we put the album out. We tour it for a year straight. Then we come home and we would start working on another album. That might take us a year. Sometimes it takes me 2 years to do. And then we would repeat the cycle. And during the pandemic, I decided, like most people, that I wanted to reimagine and come up with new approaches for what can I offer the world and how do we do it. And so I've been working really hard, me and BK, with this podcast. This is a new endeavor for us, you know what I'm saying? And so we're doing this tour to let people know because people are used to coming and seeing us on tour, but a lot of people still don't know that we do this podcast. So we're doing the tour to announce that. Also, we released new music that we didn't give a long lead up for. And it's not an album that took me a year to make. Basically, it's a 3-song collection, like a 3-song body of work that I wanted to release during this time. So we just dropped the 12-inch with those 3 songs. We've got this podcast rocking. We just did 2 sold-out shows in Minneapolis, and now we're on the East Coast leg of the tour. If you're hearing this, we dropped this on Mondays, which means that we've still got our Philadelphia show on October 5th. We still have our DC show on October 8th. We still have our North Carolina show on the 7th, and then our Atlanta show on October the 8th. And then after that, I do a week of speaking engagements and religious events that are open to the public. I'll spend a week at Duke University. And then on Friday, the 14th of October, inshallah, I go to Houston to be with Imam Khalis Rashad and the Ibrahim Islamic Center, people that are really dear to my heart. It's like one of my homes away from home there in Houston. And on that Friday, the 14th, I'm going to do 2 public events, 2 events that are open to the public. One will be our weekly Friday worship service, midday. So I'll be doing the sermon and leading the prayer, and that is open to the public. And then that night at the mosque, we'll also do a conversation between me and Imam Khalis. You can get all that information for all of this stuff on brotherali.com. You can also go to Brother Ali is Blind on social media, on Instagram, and get all that good stuff. And I'm just grateful to be out here doing my thing. And these things that we've been imagining since the pandemic, they're starting to happen. And we're starting to shift the way that we do things. There are a lot less steps in between an idea or an inkling or a desire inside my heart as a creative person, and me and BK1 as my, collaborator, producer, partner, and all of this stuff. The steps in between having a desire or a vision and it being in the world and happening are a lot fewer. And it's a lot quicker process now. I'm really, really grateful for that. It's a beautiful thing, especially to be this many years in, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like healthy. I'm feeling good. I feel young. I feel energetic. You know what I'm saying? I feel hopeful. And I feel very content in this moment. And that's as good as it gets to be content. I know a lot of people that are much more successful than me that are not that outwardly successful. And I know a lot of people that are struggling on the come up. And that struggle in the come up time is some of the most enjoyable, fun moments that you can't get back. So if you're in that phase, enjoy that joint, man. I hope there's a way for you to know that the fun you're having right now and the excitement you have and the world of possibilities that's open and the sky being the limit, it's dope. That's an amazing time. And there's a lot of highs and lows that follow it. I'm going to jump into this episode. We have an incredible guest with us, and I'm not going to spend too much time setting it up because as soon as I do jump in with Young Guru, you're going to hear me explain to him the way that I understand him. But Young Guru is a world-class producer and engineer and educator and just really an emblematic figure for the culture of hip hop. And he's a historical figure in that sense. Young Guru has recorded a lot of amazing artists, but he has recorded exclusively everything that Jay-Z said into a microphone, making music anyway, from 1999 until now. So Jay-Z started his career, officially in 1996 with Reasonable Doubt. So there's a period there where he's working with different engineers. But once he meets Young Guru in 1999, he's the one that's going to be recording him from then on. And what you hear in this interview that I'm really trying to talk about and get out and talk and elaborate upon and explore with him is that it's not just that he points the microphone at him well. It's not just that he makes his voice sound good. It's not just that he mixes these records well, but it really is the relationship, the brotherhood between these two people, the trust between them, the intimacy between them, the artistic expression that exists between them. That's a really, really beautiful thing. So we're going to jump in here with the great Young Guru. I'm so grateful that he came on the show. Young Guru is not somebody that I know extremely well, but we've talked throughout the years. We've seen each other and run into each other throughout the years. He's been somebody that's been really, really supportive of me, and he's somebody that I really appreciate. I'm just so grateful that a person like this exists in the culture. So we're going to jump in. We're brought to you, as always, by the Zakat Foundation. We're also brought to you this week by Better Help Online Therapy Platform. Enjoy this episode of the Travelers Podcast. Man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for doing this, man.
Thank you.
I know it's a crazy time.
It's a little hectic, but go through it.
Man. Thank you. I want to say that at the beginning that we got this myth in the West, in white supremacist cultures, of like the self-made great person, the self-made great one. Whereas like traditional people know that we do have great ones. Like the creator seems to select certain people to be the voice of something and to be the face of something. And that person is absolutely great. But there's never really a great one that doesn't also have a great community and that isn't part of a great chain and a great culture and a great team of people around them. And one of the examples that comes to mind when I think about you, and I've mentioned this to you before, and I think it's especially relevant because of the fact that Jay named his child Rumi. And the great poet Rumi, we have all of this work because of the fact that Rumi was like a legal, like he taught Sharia law. Like that's what he did. He was like a scholar of the outward practice of Islam, what's acceptable in Islam and what's not. And he had somebody that came along and basically flipped his whole understanding. So like Shemps came along, and Rumi was well known for being a teacher of outward religion. And he basically said, like, when is this going to become real to you, though? Like, when are you going to start living this through your heart and teaching it through your heart? And then Shemps disappears. Some people say that he was killed. Some say he left, but he disappears. So now Rumi has to figure out what to do with that. And so he's like bursting with poetry and, his love for his friend that left and all of these things that are going on inside of him. But the reason that we have and Rumi never wrote anything down. And he would get in these ecstatic states where he would start to just spit these bars. And there's a person named Osamaddin Chalabi that wrote all of his stuff down for him, recorded it, he arranged it, he organized it. He made it, so that we could receive it. And then also there are certain parts, like, so Rumi's greatest work is the Mesnevi, and Samadina Chalabi actually is the one that said, like, you need to create like a grand body of work that we can give to people. He encouraged it. He was really almost like a spiritual advisor to Rumi. And there are times where it's like some of these things, people even say that Samadin's work some of his words might actually be in there. And so people thought he was just the scribe, like, oh, he just writes down what Rumi says. But they realized that, like, that state that Rumi needed to get into to be able to create that work, he could only do that when Usamuddin Chalabi is there. You know what I'm saying? Like he's actually important to that work. And so I think that's so extremely relevant because of the fact that you got, Jay-Z, obviously, like, the creator has chosen him to be this figure to us on so many levels. And if you look at him before Big and after Big, he's not the same person. He's not the same artist. You know what I mean? And then also, if you look at him before your presence in his life and work and after, it's not the same. You know what I mean? And so, for as much as he means to us, those of us that understand culture and creativity and art and the way that it actually comes into the world and is able to become present in a way where the world can appreciate it and learn from it and be fed by it, it becomes really, really clear what a tremendous figure you are, what you mean to us, and your role in what's been delivered to the world, man. And so, for that, man, I have so much profound love and respect, even before meeting you and before even like getting a sense of who you are, just so much profound love and respect, man.
I appreciate that. I mean, the way you put that is beautiful. I've never heard it expressed like that. And you actually schooled me. That part of Rumi I did not know, number one. But I would humbly say that, I don't know if I can necessarily compare myself, but there are, I understand the liking of it, or putting those two things together. I feel as though my expression comes from just an understanding of hip hop, and an understanding of frequencies, and an understanding of where you are in time, and those things combined. I think what helps me be that person that you're describing. And of course, I love the analogy because of the fact that, without Rumi, this person doesn't get to all the way express themselves. So, again, you're starting with Jay, but then I guess my expression of that comes from the person that is there to bounce those ideas off, to ask, are we going in the right direction a lot of time? Someone who's obviously listened and understands fully the whole catalog, so that you're not repeating yourself, or so that your art is going in a new direction. I think that sort of is the talent of what I do, besides just the trying forever on this search to master sonics, to master sound.
Right.
So it's just beyond just the thing that we can hear, 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, understanding vibration, and understanding that vibration is the foundation of life, like literally, without vibration, we wouldn't have anything, even solids, So vibration, for me, is that thing of harmony. Harmony isn't just the things, the sounds that go together. It's like I said, understanding the human range of where we can hear, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. But understanding why it extends on both ends. You have kilohertz that go way further in the higher ranges, and kilohertz that go way further in the lower ranges, and understanding the infinite possibilities of those and what that brings about. So I think that is where my draw to Hazrat Khan and to Sufi teachings comes, because it is that thing of understanding vibration as harmony.
That's right.
And seeing that vibration, like some of his best quotes of, if we can see that in a child and understand what that means, in harmony.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it comes from. But also too, just having that understanding of hip hop, and just always being so curious about the music and how it's created, and from a cultural sense, from a
Yes.
technical sense, um, and having an understanding of we have the freedom to sort of do whatever it is that we want.
There's something about like the phrase now, like where we at, go. You know what I mean? There's something about that that's like, I mean, obviously, we just have this, like, we just have like another testament. Like, we just got like another book of Hove in the form of one verse. You know what I mean? That's like, he never stops giving. You know what I mean? When there's no longer the need for him to compete, it seems like he's out of the phase of needing to compete for who's got the number hits and how many summers the record is and all that stuff. Where it's just like, he's more in an Andre 3000 space now, where it's like, when I have something that God has given me to tell all of you, then I'll come and deliver it in a way that only the divine can inspire it. But there's something about that. But so that's where that phrase comes from, is that. But there's something like one of the observations I've always had and of you, and I'm glad I get to ask you about this. But it feels to me like, and like you said, like you're not just a guy pointing the mic at Jay-Z, but you're something of an advisor. And there's like the question of like, where are we at, Goo? Because so much of what Jay-Z has to do in order to take the message and the music and the culture and these things into the broader conversation require him to step outside the box. He's done so much that nobody's ever done before. Like, he's lived outside the box, even though if like Hove does a B-side concert, that's him doing all of the things that all our favorite rappers do. He can do that for hours. But then when he does an arena joint, it's like, these are all the things that I've done that have shown the world the black genius and the artistic genius and all of the stuff in this music. But in order to do that, he's got to be in a very uncomfortable zone that most people could never go. And it's always felt to me like your presence there, because you're so moored and rooted and grounded in all of the things that we're talking about, the hip hop tradition, the black excellence tradition, the spiritual tradition. It's like, as long as my man is here, I know that I'm not going to be, even if I'm on uncharted territory, where we at, go, like I'm always going to be grounded and rooted as long as I can do this in the room with my man.
I appreciate that, and you know, the where we at go is again double entendre. If
Mm,
you look at it in that fashion of him saying sort of when do I start? Like
mhm.
where is this? Like count me. It's basically like go count me number one on a very just realistic and bottom level, but it's also on a level of where we at. Like what are we about to talk about? Since we've talked about so many things, like what are we? Here's where we are now. Like what do we talk about? Sort of thing. And I think that's the double entendre of it. But when it comes to those things like the shows and like what we have to design and having a great understanding of our audience, of people who are all the way from 12 years old, who their parents may have introduced them to this and maybe their first concert, all
Mhm.
the way to people that have, that are 60 years old, that have listened from the very beginning. And knowing that we may only have 2 hours to do something in a live show, you have to sort of pick and choose of, yeah, we're going to do the hits. And I'm absolutely not someone who shies away from hits, because again, if you know what we're trying to do with music, it is to connect to the most people. So these are the ones that resonated. These are the ones that sent out a vibration that connected with a lot of people. But then
Yeah.
there's also people that have their personal connections, so there's like a section at the end of the show. And it's a funny thing where when we do, the big arenas, and there's a section at the end where he's like, okay, go just strip it down, just turntables, no band, me and you. And a lot of those times I'll try to be extra prepared and say, okay, I'm going to play. And he's like, don't tell me, just play it. And,
Mm.
he wants that part to be spontaneous. And he'll talk me through it, but he wants it to feel like me and him there. Like, oh, I forgot he'll make a joke out of it, but then I don't remember. Or he'll like go put the mic to the crowd to get the first couple words or something like
Mhm.
that if he forgets the lyrics. But I just find that interesting where I'm trying to be so prepared. And that's just a thing he loves, where he's just like, don't even tell me what you're going to play. Just play it. I trust you that you know what we just played in the show. You know which ones people love, because I'm one of those people that always gets those conversations of, oh, Goo, I needed 6 songs off of Reasonable Doubt. And I'm like, bro, I got to do Reasonable Doubt, Blueprint 2, like American
Mhm.
Gangster. Look, no matter what I play, it would take 8 hours for me to play everyone's favorite song.
Yeah, man. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah, those parts of it. And then for me, it's an appreciation thing. It's something where someone as great as him has trusted me for all these years. So my way of showing gratitude is to say, okay, I understand you have so many businesses and so many things that pull you in so many directions. If I can be super on point with the shows, with the mixing of the albums, with the deliveries of the albums and things like that, it's one less thing that you have to really worry about. You can check that box off. You can sort of give me maybe a 30-second direction that may take me 2 days, but then you know that I'm going to handle it. Especially with the shows where, very much so the sequencing of the show is his mind. And he'll give it to myself and Omar, who's our musical director. And it's up to us to weave it in together and, maybe change a key here and there to get to another song or, those sort of things. And then he'll be able to come to a rehearsal. Most of the rehearsals are 3 or 4 days, and we're asking him not to come so that we can get the band together so that people can learn songs. If there's new songs, obviously, if we're doing a tour, there's a new album, and they need to learn those songs. So again, we're not wasting his time so that when he walks in, he can go, oh, I like that transition. Oh, I don't. Change it to this, So it's being that vehicle. There's one time where I was watching a documentary where Bob Marley and they were doing, what's his name, Chris Blackwell. And someone asked Chris Blackwell, was he his mixer? And Bob was like, no, he's my interpreter. So it's just like...
Yes. Absolutely.
That.
It's that. Yeah, it's that. I remember I was just watching the Chris Rock joint the other day, and it made me think about you. He said, sometimes you're the front man, sometimes you're on tambourine. He's like, man, it's Hall and Oates. I don't know what Oates does, but Hall never had a hit without him. You know what I mean? Like there's like that thing of the presence. I want to ask. I'm gonna get back to this meaning thing, but I selfishly am gonna ask you a technical question with the show. So oftentimes, we have these songs, especially the older joints, where people are pitching the sample. The original record is in key, and then we get it on an MPC or something like that, and we're nudging it just a little bit, and so it's no longer in any particular key. Then when you bring in musicians to try to play along with that, either they have to tune or you have to go in the session and like tune the sample. Do you tune? I'm assuming you tune the sample when you do that?
I absolutely tune the sample. So when, again, having an understanding of our production style. So if the song is in one key and you either speed it up or you manipulate it, it will be in another key. You just have to figure out what.
And between keys, it's not even in like locked into a key.
Yeah, that's the story I was going to get to. That a lot of times the artist or the producer when they're doing this, they may just put it on +5 or +8 on a turntable, not thinking of key, and it may end up falling in between keys. So it's much easier for me to tune it either like whatever it's closer to. If I need to tune it up or tune it down, just so that the band is not keep tuning their instruments, it's easier for me just to tune the sample and then they can play. And then sometimes it's really weird. There's some stuff on Reasonable Doubt where we're just so blessed to have the tools that we have, where I actually had to put it in Melodyne. And now Melodyne has the ability to tune, like, say, some of the bottom, the pianos were off. So it's like if I put the pianos in tune, then the bass is going to be off. And then it was like, well, it was easier for me to tune the pianos to the right thing and then tune the bass, just by itself. And we have these wonderful tools now where I can do that. But yeah, to answer your question directly, I always tune the sample so that it's much easier for the band. And plus, people have rehearsed so long, in their lives, and taking their instruments off tune would sort of mess their ear up a little bit. So I like to tune the sample.
Yeah, it's crazy whenever you have those experiences with a band that have been trained in such a way, you know what I mean? That like, and then also so many of the older joints, especially, like people are mixing samples that are not necessarily in key with each other. You know what I mean? But there's a beauty in it that a trained musician might not understand, that a hip hop ear understands. They're like, no, these things are right. I know they're not right in the way that you've been trained, but they're actually right. And that's really from a jazz aesthetic. You know what I mean? Like that's so much of what jazz really brought into at least in the modern context. That like, man.
Well, again, you have to deal with the science and again, understanding and studying that when you're talking about keys, or most of the time we're talking about a Western scale.
Mhm.
So we come up with these interesting words, and it's still based off a Western scale where we say microtones. And all
Yeah.
microtones is for that person who's been trained in a Western scale to be
Right.
able to understand notes that fall in between the cracks on the piano. It's exactly what you're talking about. The greatest example I can give you of that of popular music is Bollywood and Indian music, right? So it's that those sort of scales fall in between the notes that we've chosen because we basically said, okay, A is 440.
Mhm.
Again, that's sort of a preset, and we say we're going to go up a half step, and we have 12 of those, and that's what creates that full range, and then we repeat that a bunch of times. So understanding that there are other scales or there are tonal things that come culturally from people all around the world that may not be producing a pure tone. It may be
Right.
producing two tones at once. Obviously, we think of like click language where you're actually saying vowel sounds and clicks at the same time, and that
Mhm.
is part of the communication. So for me, it's interesting. Like that is one of the only times where my guitar player has to literally put down his if he's playing, Big Pimpin' because that's in an Indian scale. Then
Mhm.
he'll have to put his westernized scale of guitar down and pick up the one that's been tuned specifically for that song. So it's very interesting.
Wow. So he you got a tech that's tuning a joint just for Big Pimpin'.
Yeah, yeah,
Crazy.
absolutely, absolutely. And there's some really amazing things that I've seen done where now there's a piece of equipment that I saw at a kid from Georgia Tech. He actually won the contest, but there was a contest, and all he did was create these things that slide up and down the fret. And if you put them in a certain position, it will
Yeah.
change the tuning of the guitar on the fly. It was a really interesting concept.
So I worked with there's a guitar player who passed away, but he's from Philly. His name is Jeff Lee Johnson. He worked a lot with Amir with Questlove and the Soulquarians. So he's the guy that played the crank guitar on the beginning of Mama's Gun. Down, 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 down. And I think he might have even played the on the Erica version. He played on Like Water for Chocolate, all that stuff. He played on one of my records and he came in, and this is 2007. So we didn't have all that technology fully. Like
Right.
we weren't locked in with it yet. So we weren't quite sure how to tune. And my whole record, he played guitar on my whole record, and it was made on an ASR of all things. So it's just like, man, we're not stretching this. There's none of that happening.
Right.
And so he came in, and I was like, he ran through all the songs I wanted him to play in almost one take. And some of them I'm like, I think this is a little out of tune. Without retuning his guitar, he could just hold his finger in the fret
Yeah.
in a way that would just make it on tune. And he's like, "Bro, I grew up in Philly. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I grew up playing broken guitars and like secondhand guitars. Like, I found my first guitar in the alley. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? You don't have to retune between songs, like, because like a broken guitar loses tunes. It can't hold the tune. Like the thing is not strong enough. So, man, you get certain people that can even bend the tune without having just with their finger in their ear.
Mhm.
Amazing.
It's amazing. It's amazing. What you see necessity create.
Mhm.
That old axiom is very true. That necessity is the mother of invention. And then when people are used to it, it's like me when starting out, on belt drives and turntables and being on
Right.
people's mother and dryers. A mother and father's washer and dryer in the
Right.
basement. It's like when you get to the club with the Technique 1200s and a full set, it's like you're so comfortable because you've been in the worst situation already. But you
Mhm.
could deal with that situation if it arises. So, again, we are creative people, and we got to understand that music is just an expression, and there are no rules really. It's just what sounds good and what gives about a good vibration.
On the Travelers Podcast, our day one supporters and collaborators and visionaries have been Zakat Foundation, and we're really grateful for that. Zakat, Z-A-K-A-T, is the pillar of Islam that deals with giving back, with charitable giving, with purifying our ambition, purifying our material resources by giving back. We really want to, it's really our goal, it's really our aim and objective that all of the money that we make and the money that we sustain ourselves with and feed our families with, we want all of that money to come from sources that we feel good about. We don't want to contribute to the corruption in the world. We don't want to participate in that. But the world is such, and business is such, and money is such that it gets mixed up. There are areas where it gets gray, it gets tricky, it gets complicated. And so, one of the ways that we're commanded in the Quran to combat that and to purify that mixing of money, they say not all money is good money. And so, we want to take every opportunity we can to give back, to contribute to human beings that are in need, and to help elevate their life to one that's befitting of a human being. And Zakat Foundation operates all over the world doing just that. It's a Muslim-led organization, but they don't only help Muslims. They don't use their work to proselytize or to try to convert people. They go into a part to all the areas that they work with the reality and the understanding that the people that are experiencing this trouble, they're the experts. We're here to support them. That's the best that we're going to do. A lot of times, a big corporation will come in with millions of dollars with this attitude that, like, well, we got this money because we know better than you. And you're in trouble because you don't know what you're doing. And a lot of times they come in and they don't understand the dynamics. They don't know the nuances. They don't know all of the different layers of what's going on in the area. They throw money at a certain part of the problem and they end up exacerbating another part. And so they make things worse for as well-intentioned as they might be. Zakat Foundation makes every effort to go in and work with the people that are there. Also, they're very creative. So for example, they have an orphan relief program that operates around the world, and they came into this industrial complex of helping orphans that says we show you pictures of orphans around the world, and that tugs at your heartstrings, and you fall in love with this child and their face, and you want to help them, and that encourages people to give, and that's true. But also, what Zakat Foundation realized is that, I mean, this internalized white supremacy, these white standards of beauty, this anti-blackness, is a global reality. It's a global phenomenon. And so they had the idea, like, let's just look statistically and see who's getting helped the first and most often if people get to look at pictures. And it was younger, lighter skinned girls, whereas older, darker skinned boys were not being chosen. And so they changed all that. They said, we're not going to show you pictures. It's not a dating app. This isn't Tinder. You don't swipe left and right on children that are in need. We ask you, the default setting is before you see pictures, do you want to help the child that's most in need? Or you could choose that, or you could choose a specific part of the globe. So if you want to help people in Somalia, you can. If you want to help people in Palestine, you can. If you want to help orphans in a certain area, you can do that. But they saw just by changing that once people had that opportunity to see it that way, to frame it that way, they said, oh, let me help the person that needs it the most. And then they started seeing it become more equitable overnight. When you donate to their program to help orphans, 100% of that donation goes directly to children and their families. They don't use it to pay salaries. There's no overhead. They're not using that to advertise. They're not using that for the Travelers Podcast to support us. So head to zakatfoundation.org or follow them on social media at ZakatUS. Look at the work that they do. Find a way to jump in. This is incredible work done by people that are approaching it from a human perspective, from a creative perspective. And it's incredible work. And we're really, really fortunate. We're very blessed. We're very grateful to be rocking with Zakat Foundation. Cultures oftentimes have a progression where something starts as a microculture. So you have hip hop starting in the Bronx. And then by the time Brooklyn starts getting involved, and I know there are people in Brooklyn, they're like, no, Grandmaster Flowers, we had hip hop too.
I just had that discussion the other day with the guys who actually did Family Pride. So
It's dangerous, man. There's so many dangerous conversations in hip hop right now. You bring up Puerto Ricans, it's like you might have to fight somebody. You know what I'm saying? If you bring up, and the thing that LL just did with academics, I thought that was really beautiful. Like there's a lot of like really cantankerous conversations in the culture. But I mean, so so by the time it reaches, for example, like Chuck D in Long Island, you know what I mean, and Rakim and like the people that live in Long Island, and then by the time it reaches different places, or even just like those tapes, the tapes of the original recordings of Kaz and Bam and people like that that reach the people in New Jersey, and then they are the ones that are able to put it on a record and make rappers delight. You know what I mean? Having that thought. I wonder how much of you growing up in Delaware, your father's from DC, mother's from Newark, so you're spending time in those places as well. But so you're kind of like in the shadow of Philly to a certain degree in Delaware, but so you're very connected. It's not that you're disconnected. It's not like it was very different from us being in Minneapolis, but so you're close, but also you're able to see things that the eye. One of the things Rumi said is the eye sees everything, but the eye can't see itself. We need reflections in order to understand what we are. You know what I'm saying? And so like the culture needs almost for somebody to observe it and to participate in that way. And I wonder with you being, close, but being down the road a little bit, I wonder how that shaped your view of the culture and the art form.
It's a very interesting thing. One, we are like almost like a suburb of Philly,
Hmm.
because it's really like from downtown to my mother's house in Delaware. You could drive 20 minutes, 25 minutes at maximum. Number one. And then with my parents being from DC and from Jersey, when I go to Jersey, you hear New York radio. So it was hearing the radio, the tapes obviously floated over the bridge. And in DC, obviously it was the infusion of the go-go, along with funk and things of that nature. But I
Hmm.
think one of the interesting things, I think Bob said this best, is that when you live in a rural place, you understand putting your hand in the dirt and waiting 6 months and getting a result. So the worth of the things that you do comes from work, how much work you do. You have a front yard, you have a backyard. Even the projects have a front yard and your own front yard and backyard. It's very natural for you to, if you don't have money, go in the morning and get the chicken necks from the back of the supermarket and then go crabbing or go fishing and actually, again, that's what I mean by
Mm.
put your hand in there, whether or not that's planting food, whether or not that's fishing, farming. It's very normal for me growing up, cows being around and horses and things of that nature versus growing up in a city life. The only thing that separates you is money. So it's just like whoever has the
Hmm.
better life is.
Right, 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 right.
So the whole mentality becomes get money. Or
Hmm. Hmm.
I grew up in a project building and there's let's say 10 units on every floor, and it's a 13 floor project, and then that's just my building, and then there's 10 buildings that make up this project. Like there's so many people and so little land that you don't get to really put your hands in the dirt. And again, the only thing you see that will get you where you want to go is money. So that mentality of just get money, get money, get money now is different when you come from sort of a more rural area. So I think Delaware was just the perfect blend of those two, because Wilmington is city, but you drive 10, 15 minutes and you're in a rural area. You're around, and let alone if you drive like 20 minutes or a half an hour, you're at a beach. You're smelling horseshoe crabs in the morning, regardless of where you live. Being, like I said, being around livestock is very normal to you. So you sort of have that reverence for when I'm eating a piece of chicken, that this thing was alive and someone had to kill this and prepare this, whether or not
Hmm.
that's fish, whatever it is, this thing was alive. So you sort of have that sort of reverence for life.
Hmm.
Grow up a little bit more in a rural area. Um, that and then that's the one thing that we, again, if you grow up in a city environment, it's a lot easier for you to say, oh, this thing broke, let me just give it to this person to fix it. Whereas in the rural environment, you're grabbing tools and you're learning how to fix something, because the place where you have to take it to get fixed is so far away that you'll miss the whole day if you sit there and go, somebody else has to fix this. So that's what sort of led me to engineering as well. But I think that's the biggest difference is it's not this immediate, I got to get money, get money, get money.
Right.
That's the only thing. It's just like, no, I have to work hard and I have to wait. And it's going to take 6 months for
Hmm.
this thing to grow out of the ground. And then I'll reap the benefits of it. That mentality. So I think that's what the only difference is for me, other than just having that blessing of again being able to hear radio very early in New York City, getting those early tapes of the classic battles before there were records, all the crews that were out, and then seeing the different sort of representation of that in DC, because both of them are uh, interacting with the crowd, but in DC it's very much more of the call and response. In hip hop, it's say my verse. Then inside of that, I have call and response. Then there's a routine. Then there's call and response. In go-go, there's way more call and response and personalization of names of who's in the audience from the MC. So it was watching those things, and then also seeing young Black individuals in DC who actually learned how to play instruments. So go-go is very much a live situation. So it wasn't this stigma of learning an instrument. It was all young Black men, regardless if it was on buckets, if it was on whatever, like you said earlier, broken guitars, any of those things. You had to learn, in order to be in the band, you had to learn how to play some sort of instrument. So that was another, just blessing of growing up and visiting these places just repeatedly, visiting my grandparents.
So much of like when we talk about so oftentimes at these like musical marriages, it's like two people that bring different parts of the spectrum together, things that seem like they're not reconcilable. And what I was thinking about when you were talking about just the difference in really city life and rural life, I also think about Jay-Z and his story. Like Hov is somebody who was so individual for his whole life. It feels like
Mm-hmm.
that was just like me against this project. It's me against whatever's going on in this intergenerational stuff in my family. It's me against my brother. Like it's me against, the world. And whereas you really feel like someone, and what I know about your story, that you really have been grown in communities
Oh, absolutely.
your whole life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I didn't really realize that until
Mm,
well, I realized it early, but I'm saying the contemplation of how incredible it was of what my parents did really came to me when I slowed down during COVID, uh, and just had that thought of it was amazing to me, watching my parents, because of the fact that them coming to college together, and imagine people that are in college, some people will graduate, you'll never see those people again. It might have been just an error in your life. But my parents actually were in a group of people who decided to move within a 5-block radius of each other. There wasn't my godmoms and the men that raised me, they all went to school with my parents. And it was literally, walk a half a block down and it was this person's house, and then walk another half a block down this way and another person's house, that were all friends. So naturally their children are going to be around each other. I have childhood friends that I've never met. And I know that sounds funny, but it was like my mother and your mother put us down to sleep in a crib at the same time. I never met them on a basketball court or a football field or any. They were just always there, almost like a family member. So
mm,
building that community, me learning to play chess from, the lady's husband, that does my mom's hair, or all of those different sort of things were because of that type of community. So I've always known, the mayor of my city. I've always known the city council. I've always known those people as well because they come from that same community and they know my parents intensely. I mean, there's a part of it that as a kid you don't like, because it's like you can't do anything wrong because this person's going to catch you and beat
right.
you and take you to your mother and tell you what you did.
And then by the time you get home, she already knows.
But that's part of the community. That's part of what it is. Even to a certain degree, if you're talking about illegal life back then, there was a different type of hustler. He was trying to be very quiet. He was very nice to older people. It wasn't this thing of this super testosterone and pull out a gun thing. It was, I'm trying to take care of the whole community, even though he was doing illegal things. I'm just
Hmm.
pointing out that's how ingrained community was. You didn't do anything
Hmm.
around kids or women. You
Right.
helped the older ladies. Those things you told the people that had nothing to do with any of it to get out of here because something's about to happen.
Right.
Like those sort of things were going on in the community, and that's a direct reflect of the way my parents just put that whole thing together. Somebody asked me before, like, did it have a name? And I was just like, no, it was just what they did. Because of the fact that they were all friends and just helping each other. So naturally, you start to build those things that that everyone else has seemed to figure out of how to build that community and keep that community.
It's just a way of being. One of your father's closest friends was the head of Parks and Rec in your
Yes,
city, and you became the DJ of the Parks and Rec parties at like 12, 13 years old, right?
yeah, absolutely. I consider him like my second father, Mr.
Mhm.
Sheehan. Um, just grew up with him always being there. I can remember just going over to his house and barbecues every other weekend. Sometimes they didn't have any money, so this is when we wasn't eating right. A little bologna might just be on the grill, but it was like it was about that. It was the grill. It was them buying beers and playing pinochle and letting us have our music till about like 6, 7 o'clock at night, and they used to laugh and be like, you got a half hour left, and then it's going to be hour. It was that sort of thing. We would get up as kids and go crabbing,
Mm,
and if we're out there like 6:30, 7 in the morning, by like 9, 10 o'clock, we got 2 bushels full of crabs. We bring
mm.
that home. We put that on the grill. We steam those. So it was that was what it was. It was going to barbecue and those men teaching me how to play basketball. Um, and they were still in a league. It was a spot called West Center City in Wilmington. That they still play basketball together. So all of those things, but he was like my second father. And yes, he ran park and recreation. So prior even to me doing those things, he was like, okay, well, you're coming to get a job as a locker attendant at one of the
Mm,
pools.
mm,
So,
mm,
during
mm,
the
mm.
summertime, then when you get of age, he's going, okay, well, they're having certification down at Brown's Boys Club for lifeguards. Lifeguards back then was making like $12, $15 an hour in the 80s. So it's just like,
Crazy,
okay, go get the
crazy.
certification. You're going to become a lifeguard. Now you have a job, not only a job in the summertime. If you wanted to, you could do a hotel in the wintertime and just watch the pool. Then he
Mm,
also, monumental in terms of you're into the hip hop thing, the DJing thing. Okay, great. The whole point was the violence was getting so crazy that they wanted to have these, midnight basketball games, and that was sort of his idea of if I could have the whole project or the whole community in one spot, it's easier to police. It's easier to give people something to do. It's easier to sort of make an alternative for that exact time period when the violence is spiking. So it was just super intelligent. And then him allowing me to be part of the DJs that were out there, it not only, of course, musically, it puts you in a space where you got to learn parties, you got to learn people and what record to play and how to control the crowd through music. But it also gives you a place to be at that time when maybe at that age you're awkward in the party. You don't know where to stand. You don't know how to go up and talk to a girl. Like I never had that
mhm.
position because I was always behind the rope and I was always DJing. So that thing of being comfortable having a position allows you to meet everybody else. The MC has to come over to me to get the microphone in order for him to become whoever he wants to be in front of the crowd. So those sort of things are all built off of community. Because without him, I would have never been in those positions.
One of the things that I've heard you say is that you were raised by revolutionaries.
Mm,
And so I'm curious about, and we've talked a little bit about like the different things that we've read, and it's a lot of the same, you know what I mean? It's like a lot of the same stuff. But I'm curious, there's a phrase that I've heard that says that, and this is, this is a little bit of my own stuff in here that I'm curious, makes me curious about this, but I've heard it said that Islam is the unofficial religion of hip hop music.
mm,
And I see that even carried out through Jay and through Jay Electronica, and like these themes. And we know that Black Islam in particular is a spectrum. It's not a monolith. Like there's a lot of different expressions. So hearing Jay talk so much about the 5% nation of gods and earths
mhm.
and the nation of Islam and also Sufism and things like that. Um, can you reflect and just kind of take me through like what's been your relationship with Islam vis-a-vis hip hop and Black empowerment?
Right.
Any reflections or meditations you have on it?
Amazing question that no one's ever asked before. So obviously, growing up, my mother was a devoted Christian still to this day. Right. So you grow up in the Black church and you get that experience, you get the music, you get the preaching, you see people, talking in tongues, and you see all these different things. So then when you get of an age of understanding and you start to question these things, it just so happened that the music was starting to do that at the exact same time.
Right, right, right.
You're, I'm born in 74, so 88, 89, when you're 14, 15 years old and Poor Righteous Teacher comes out with an album and it says, take off your cross because it's crossing up your mental, and the gods was definitely just strong, not just only Rakim. I mean, obviously that was our first sort of, I don't want to say introduction to it, but it was the first time where we had it as a superstar, like the hip hop superstar is now claiming the gods. So, you start to see those things in his dress, in the way that he's talking, and the fact that he doesn't curse that much in his demeanor and things of that nature. And then you're also building with the gods, literally on the street. So you start to question all these different things. And it's like those sort of things sort of influence you as a kid when you're questioning the world and questioning religion and trying to figure out who you're going to be and where you want to go. So then on my Jersey side, it's like me being young, my cousins knew a lot of the people that would end up being the flavor youth. So, my cousin Tariq didn't call Latifah Latifah. He called him, he was just like, oh, Dana that used to play basketball, she got a record. You know what I mean? My cousin would say something like that. So obviously in that crew, you're going to look at Lakim Shabazz. And Lakim Shabazz is going to be that sort of thing that leads you down that path.
And Shakim.
Yeah, and obviously him too as well. So it's just like those things through hip hop, what sort of got you even interested or saying, what is this? Or let me go find out what they're talking about. Or Rakim, just to go back, says got you out of Triple Stage of Darkness. You're like, what is Triple Stage of Darkness? Because you're listening to MCs and you're trying to decipher what they mean. I was one of those people that was like, I understand De La Soul, even though it's coded language, I get it. So when Rakim says that, it's just like, what? Like, what are you talking? And that's what leads you down that road.
Because that's directly from the Quran. Like now you're in the Quran.
Yeah.
There's no other, that's where it takes you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Amazing. So, how have you seen that progression? Because it felt like, so as I embraced Islam and became an imam and all this stuff, like because of hip hop. And it felt like, like we were thoroughly in charge for a long time. And then it feels like it went away for a minute. And, in terms of like the overt expression, Jay Electronica and to a large degree, Hove have been so, they really have represented it for us again, like really strongly, and I've been around Jay Electronica, not Jay-Z, but like, what is that? What's the feeling or the atmosphere or the vibe with regard to that understanding of life within those creative spaces, within the business space? Like, how is that informing this particular expression within the culture now?
With Jay Electronica, is fun and interesting to watch because he, to me, is the Bob Marley equivalent of that in music.
He's the Bob Marley of the Nation of Islam.
Yeah, his sole purpose is that with the music. So you've been around him, you know him.
I love the brother, man. I love him.
And that's what I mean, where his whole purpose is going to be that the way Bob, you can still get love, rude boy, revolutionary, religious, all in the same song. I think Elect is the same way, where he knows his purpose, and his purpose is not the average. I need to release an album on your time, or I need to follow these rules for it to be a #1 seller. I don't think he's, this is my opinion of being around him a lot. I think he's more concerned with his message and what he gets out. So that is the thing with Jay Elect that drives it, is that, or makes him different, is that it's the crux, it's the center, it's always going to be there. I don't think he will make music that doesn't have that as the center. And then you see, his expression, what it is. With Jay, it's a lot more alluding to things, and it's a lot more of, I think Jay gave us a little bit more of the actual search. And, he opened up a little bit on 444, where he was talking about, a family member and an uncle, or preachers, or things of that nature, of looking at them and then saying, okay, then I went out and searched for all these different things. Or then, doing your expression very quietly, where I don't have to say certain things, but then you'll see me at a Knick game, repping the flag. So, that those sort of things are what I think that drives the expression, and to make it normal and to make it, I don't know if it was necessarily the time period, but it was just like those 89, 90 time periods of when it was super, super strong.
Yeah.
um, I think changed as people changed. And when money, a larger amount of money came into it, then it became a different thing. But
Yeah.
that was very normal, for any act. And, we're naming the major ones like a Poor Righteous Teachers or like those. But there's so many of the guys that have repped all throughout hip hop that is sort of is just like you said, it becomes a de facto, for us as hip hop, whether or not that's Brand Nubian, or whether or not that's,
I mean, Ice Cube,
yeah, I could just go down the line.
I mean, I thought like that photo on the back of death certificate with Ice Cube reading the final call, and you got all of the G's on one side, and then you got the FOI on the other side. You know what I mean? And bringing the worlds together.
Yeah,
It's an
it's the
amazing.
perfect balance. Or you could look at, you know, just the different expressions, where Public Enemy might have been a little bit more Black Panther, and with that ideology, and then you look on the West Coast and you have, even in gangster music, it's still representations of the movie that Bone put out called Bastards of the Party, where it's
Hmm.
just like what happens when you do come in and you kill off all the Black Panthers on the West Coast. What do you think their kids are going to do, or who do you think they're going to be when they've already seen their elders standing in front of the police with guns, challenging the police, guns being legal in California? Then it's naturally going to lead you to that thing of Bastards of the Party. So I
Yeah.
thought was just perfectly titled, because it's just like you're putting a whole generation out there without fathers.
Hmm.
And even still, you start to see where the consciousness pull from comes from Islam.
So you have all of this cultivation going on in your life. But I heard you say one time, but I've never heard you talk about it too much.
Mhm.
That did you go to a all white boys Catholic school at some point?
Absolutely. It was an interesting situation because they wanted me to play basketball. It was the best education in the city. And it the funny thing is that I was never confrontational, because
Hmm.
I didn't want to sit there and yell and be like, "Oh, the thing that you're doing is wrong, and this is wrong, and that's wrong." But I would express myself. So freshman year, when you're required in the school to take religion all 4 years, by
Mm.
the third week of school freshman year, they told me that I already had I didn't have to go to religion. So I don't know if that was legal. I don't know if they were supposed to do that, but obviously they saw if he stays in this class, it's going to be a threat to the thought
No,
process.
because you're Malcolm in the prison, like, you know what I'm saying, in that in the prison scene where Malcolm is talking to the what color were the original Hebrews? Oh, very interesting. You know what I'm saying?
Or you simply ask, very basic questions of like, okay, we'll turn to this particular scripture where it's describing a bronze man and hair of wool, and I'm like, okay, well, who in here has hair of wool and who's bronze? So
Mhm.
those sort of things, or already having knowledge of the Council of Nicaea and questioning those things about the changing of the particular text.
Mhm.
Stuff that people just wouldn't know, or asking very basic natural questions of, do you take this book literal?
Right.
You started time over, because we know how old the earth is, and then it can't be 2,000 years. Or if there's just an Adam and an Eve, well then, um, we have Adam, we have Eve, and then we have their two sons, and we have these famous stories about them. If they are the only people on earth, who did Cain and Abel have sex with to produce children?
Mhm.
You understand these questions? Like,
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah.
as a freshman, I'm asking these questions because you've already been in it, and been given this information and this knowledge. So they just basically allowed me to not go to religion class. It was funny.
It's just like, "You're good. I think you know everything you need to know about this stuff."
Yeah,
So
but I wasn't being disrespectful. So sometimes there's a
mhm.
thing of when you're confronting someone else's thing, um, there's this argument that naturally happens because one person thinks one way and one person thinks another way. I can
Mhm.
respect how you think. It just doesn't make complete sense to me. But I wasn't. I'm not trying to convert you. I think some people expect it to be confrontational, and I absolutely wasn't, which is the reason why they allowed me.
So were you there for all of high school?
Yeah, all 4 years. It was mainly
You
because it was the best education
mhm.
in basketball.
So you went directly from there to Howard.
Hmm. Absolutely.
What did that feel like? We're talking about Howard 1992. Like that's a major period at Harvard in particular, or at Howard. Sorry.
Absolutely. So my guidance counselor didn't even look for it. Was either like you're going to play basketball and you already get a full ride and full scholarships. And I turned all these basketball scholarships down to go to Howard. My older cousin was there. She's 3 years older than me. So she invited me to homecoming my senior year, and then just seeing the homecoming, I was like, there's absolutely no other place I could go. So it's not, and you know, of course, it's beautiful women, but not just for women, but just the environment, the culture, what was going on. Just meeting people in that weekend, I was like, I gotta go to school here. So in '92, when I got there, you got to remember Raz Baraka, who's
Amir Baraka's son, yeah, and he's also a poet MC as well.
yeah, poet MC and also the mayor of North right now. His younger brother, Mitty, who's named after his father, Amir Baraka Jr., became one of my good friends and was also an MC. So the reason that I met him was through winning this DJ competition for the hip hop conference, and he stepped to me and wanted me to be down with his crew. So again, you know, here comes another revolutionary sort of spirit, or you know, angle, or just you know, you're going to attract sort of the same thing, the same mindsets. But being there in '92 was tremendous. It was you know, Puff hadn't started Bad Boy yet. It's just a bunch of people trying to get on in the music business, or you know, and not just music business. We had people that were just going to school to be a dentist, and they became that. We had one of the top opera singers in that would later become one of the top Black opera singers was in our fine arts. The gentleman who played Elijah Muhammad in the Malcolm X movie.
Oh, word?
Yeah, he was my Blacks in the Arts teacher. You know, he was a professor at Howard while all this was going on. Mr. Mercer, you know, was one of the greatest lawyers for entertainment. And he was the one that took us through and was one of those that would like try to make the class interesting to us. So, you know, as soon as I take an entertainment law class, we're studying the Biz Markie case about sampling. Because obviously it was a little bit newer then. So he's trying to educate us, but I mean, actually getting all the, you know, like a lawyer would do. You get all the papers and you study the whole case, and so you're super interested. So you're taking the test the same way a lawyer would, but it's on the Biz Markie case.
Right. So it's relevant to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what the environment was. And then a bunch of people giving you the attitude of there's no way that we can't do something. So I always say, like, our students are trained that if you come to a wall, you know, you're going to be like, okay, how tall is the wall? How long is it that way? Go call 5 people, get some shovels. We're going to dig. Maybe we could go under the wall. We're going to get over the wall. If that don't work, go get the dynamite. We're going to bust the wall. But somehow we're getting through this wall. A whole bunch of people. So meaning, and I wish I had a better understanding. You know, hindsight is 2020, but I wish I had a better understanding then that we had all the pieces that we needed. We just didn't have the maturity or the education of how to actually put it together. Meaning, the 555 Soul clothing line. I mean, not 555 Soul, Tribe Vibe clothing line that you see Tupac I Get Around video. You know, being produced by a Howard student who's literally getting up with a stand and selling his wares as the freshman girls walk to the freshman guys' dorm. He strategically placed his stand there. Or the amount of people that did everything. So we had guys that did clothes, that, you know, obviously graffiti artists and graphic people that were doing our flyers, you know, countless DJs and MCs, and just all of that was all together as a crew. So that sort of thing, in the spirit of it, of seeing that dynamic of that many young Black people just moving and shaking and then having success at it. And it wasn't just Puff. It was people, you know, just moving into all these different expressions. It was nothing for one of your friends to be like, hey, I just got a job at this new urban line called a Nietzsche, or this new urban line called this, or I know the person that works there because they're my friend, or, you know, and this is a representation of all 50 states doing it.
And so you're making beats and like trying to DJ for all 50 states too.
That was a huge change as well, because of the fact that, but prior to that, my whole DJing experience is either going to be Delaware, Philly, North New Jersey, or Washington, D.C. So I know what those people like. So going to Howard, and what I'm about to say is another level of it, because when you got requests to play music that was from the West Coast or from Texas or from, wherever,
Jamaica.
These were your friends. These weren't just random people coming up to you in the club trying to make a request. These are people you sat in class with, people that have helped you, women that have typed your paper for you. Like, so you're not gonna like get out of here. You're gonna like try to figure out what these people like, and you got to service all those people in sort of a like 4 to 5 hour period. If you figure back then, you weren't doing celebrity DJ night. So you literally had to, again, had to DJ from 10 o'clock to, 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning. So that was another interesting thing of learning different music that wasn't innate to you. Especially with like people from the down, like getting a lot of, I knew the popular down south records or the Texas records, but getting people really, really going in and showing you who was the foundation on their end. I remember people from the Bay asking for E40, and all I knew was like Sprinkle Me, and I was like E40, like like. But then you get this whole education, and then it's like, nah, it ain't just E40, it's Mac Dre, it's this, it's that. So that education came through friends and through trying to DJ at Howard for all those different people, and to understand. Back then, I will admit it, East Coast, we were a little arrogant in terms of we set the styles and everybody has to follow us and that sort of thing. And you start to see people whose style is different. I'm used to DC being different because DC's always been on its own thing because of go-go culture. But you start to see different slang, different ways of dressing that other people think is fresh. And they're looking at certain things that you do, like people on campus looking at Timbs like they're weird. And you know what I mean? With the way people now, it's very natural for you to be like online and hear people outside of New York make fun of New York, like y'all never gonna give up these Timbs. And it's just like, back then, it was a shock for somebody like, why do y'all wear them so much? Or like, it was that interaction, but still, not in a confrontational way. It was just people had different style.
It's amazing, just like all of the preparation, man. Like if it, like, because I'm still thinking about all this. Is like this is what goes into creating the human being and the spirit and the mind and the human being that's going to be able to be with, and really accompany Hove on the journey that he has to go on. You know what I mean? The way that you've been able to be, fed literally and figuratively by so many different elements of life, and then to go into a white school and to experience what that is and to understand what makes them respond and react and how to speak to them and how to how to disagree with them, how to differ with them, how to hold your own with them. Just the levels of preparedness. It really feels like everything I know about your life feels like training for bringing together these different influences and cultures, and it's amazing. The Travelers Podcast is sponsored this week by BetterHelp, and we receive a commission when you use our link to sign up with them. BetterHelp is an online therapy platform, and it really exists because there are so many of us that are ready to do therapy. We've gotten past the stigma that being in therapy means something is wrong with you. In my mind, the reality is that we live in these really unnatural settings. We're not close with our families. A lot of times we're isolated from our extended families. For so long, human beings lived in tribes and villages. And so we just had access to people with a variety of experiences who had a different perspective on us. They've known us for longer than we remember ourselves. And maybe they knew our parents and our grandparents and our great grandparents. So they know about the generational things that we're inheriting. We lived in these tribes, we lived in these micro societies, and we were intimate with people that could give us a variety of perspectives on ourselves. And then also we weren't isolated. So people just knew more about what each other were going through. We weren't isolated. It wasn't a secret. We didn't have to set appointments and send emails and text messages to let people know what we were going through. We lived in intimate and close proximity to each other. And now that's no longer the case for most of us. Most of us are living isolated lives. We're experiencing each other through social media, which is curated and it's just not real. And so our hearts are in need of something that we just don't have access to. And so we're ready to do therapy. But then once we get to that point, we have these barriers to accessing qualified, trained, licensed, diverse mental health professionals, and that's what BetterHelp does. It's a online network of thousands of different types of therapists. There's also different approaches to therapy. Not every therapist approaches it the same way. So BetterHelp gives us access to all of these resources that maybe we don't know how to access. If a person has a local therapy office in their neighborhood that they can just walk in and they've got all the insurance and everything all set up and ready to go, that's dope. But for me, I live in Istanbul, Turkey. And so even though my wife is a therapist and I know a lot of therapists, I couldn't just walk into their office. And a lot of times they're licensed in their particular area, you know? So I actually heard about BetterHelp on a podcast and I went to the site betterhelp.com. In this case, you're going to go to betterhelp.com/travelers. That lets them know that we hipped you to them. And then also they support the podcast. So you'll be not only embarking on your therapy journey and this self-care that we all deserve, but you'll also be supporting the work that we do here at the Travelers Podcast. So you go there. I went there and I went to their site and I did this really dope and informative and in its own way therapeutic questionnaire that asked me about, what is it that's bringing you to therapy? What are the things that you want to unpack and explore? And what are some of the experiences that you've had in your life? So some people go to therapy, we all have some sort of entrance point. Some people start because they want to deal with substance abuse. Some people want to deal with a particular trauma. Some people want to deal with relationship issues or family issues. All of these different things can bring us to therapy. And then they ask you about your preferences of what type of therapist you'd like to have. Do you want to talk to a man or a woman? Do you want to talk to a therapist of color? Do you want to talk to somebody that specializes in one of these particular areas? And then from that point, then they show you a variety of people. You see their profile, you see things that other clients of theirs have said. You get a little understanding for what their approach is, and then you book your own appointment. And immediately you can start messaging them. You can send them voice notes. You can send them text messages. When you set your appointment, you let them know, do you want to do a phone call? Do you want to do face-to-face online? Do you want to just keep it to these text messages and voice messages for now? And then you talk to a person, and once you start feeling like there's a rapport there, then you start opening up to them. If you don't get to that point, you can change your therapist at any time. No questions asked, no hurt feelings. There's nothing funny about it. Right inside the app, there's a button right there that says change therapist. And you have the opportunity to start browsing again because it's really about finding the right person with the right chemistry and the right dynamic so that you feel comfortable and confident sharing with them. And I started benefiting right away. So that's the reason that we're sharing this online therapy platform. So go to BetterHelp, BETTER, help, HELP.com/travelers and get going on your therapy journey. You always in your career have really centered women. You know what I'm saying? Like I know how instrumental you are in Rhapsody. I love Rhapsody.
They're
I
the
know
key.
how
Way before Rhapsody, women are directly the key to the whole thing. So, just in terms of just getting on, period. I did not need a passport until I met Nonchalant. Like the
Right.
first person to give me a chance, to give me a shot, to say that
5 o'clock in the morning.
that I work, for an artist is a woman. It just so happened that, during that time we got on the Fuji tour. So then I'm looking at another, monumental woman in terms of Lauryn Hill. Then again, being from Jersey and you start hanging out around the outsiders, during that time. And it's like Rob Digger is super serious in terms of being one of the
Yeah.
top MCs in that crew.
Yeah, man.
So yeah, and then all the way to Rhapsody, where it's just like it's not even her being a woman, it's just the fact of her being one of the best MCs and writers that I've ever heard, but then taking into account that I have worked with women all throughout my career, so then I may be a little bit more aware of certain things than other people when it comes to her and how she has to maneuver and move in the business.
There's just certain people that are very intentional about always not only involving women, but centering them.
Yeah,
Because Ninth is like that too. That's like, you know what I mean? Like Ninth has done that. Ninth was doing that before Rhapsody.
right.
You know what I mean? So for both of y'all to be people that have been so intentional about that. And then you look like also both people that come from rural backgrounds that are raised in villages that have strong mothers, and you know what I mean? That's a beautiful thing that ends up really being what gets you into the game seriously, being on tour. And so you did the whole Europe tour with the Fugees, right?
Yeah, the Ready or Not tour. Yeah, it was about 3 months.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And then you came back, and then that's when you go to mastering school. Is that when you connected with Chucky Thompson?
Yep. So, and again, through Nonchalant. Nonchalant was working on a second album. I went to engineering school. I expressed to her that I knew what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we were working on that album. The album never came out. It got shelved by MCA, but we were working on that album. And she introduced me to Chucky Thompson because he was supposed to not only just make music for it, but be the executive producer of it, working with her. Because obviously through the DC Connect and through Non having so much success with 5 o'clock in the morning. So she's the direct connect to introducing me to him. And that obviously becomes the next step in the elevation of not only just engineering, but just life, period.
Because like that combination of Chucky Thompson and Tony Maserati, I mean, it's like that's the whole foundation of that part of music, especially on the East Coast. Like it's really, and I know Tony did, and both of them actually worked on stuff that wasn't just East Coast. But
Mm-hmm.
man, something about that particular period.
And having a mentor that literally, not even in a sly way, but literally the command to sit in this room, learn what he knows. You know what I mean? So that had to be Chucky directly to me, but then Tony also had to be receptive to that. So, Tony was the one that like just started teaching me the things that you couldn't learn in the book, or watching his way of working and figuring out why his records sounded so heavy or they had the sound that they had. That was a huge thing too.
So, I mean, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more just about like that particular mentorship, because it seemed like there's so many influential people around you, but the way that I've heard you talk about Chucky Thompson is that seems like a very clearly like Mr. Miyagi Danielson
Oh yeah,
vibe between the two of y'all.
absolutely. He saw it early in me. He was the first person that was ever just like breaking down everything in the studio in terms of this is the music reel and this is gonna be the vocal reel, and we're gonna put all the music on here, and we're gonna put a 2-track over here, and then we're gonna do fake vocals over here, then we're gonna bounce that foot back over here, on these 2 tracks, and then we can do her leads and all her backgrounds. He was literally showing me how to maneuver when you were very limited on tracks in the studio, number one. So he was getting a huge sound by just doing dubs and bouncing and things of that nature. But I've said it plenty of times that the real key was that he taught me how to live. So, when you're trying to exist in this music business where we don't get a check every Friday, you got to figure out how to live. And Chucky was monumental, but it's his personality of him being such a incredible person. He was one of the nicest people. I never really seen him yell. We never had arguments, none of that type of stuff. He would do things. It may be something where I may have not understood it at the time, but I just really, and I mean, of me ever getting upset with him. But there was one time where we had gone out to the club the night before, just on some older brother, we were going out. And the very next day when I got to work, he had typed up a piece of paper, like almost a memo, that was like, these are all the things that you do really good. These are all the things that you need to improve on. And when I first looked at it, my ego kicked in and I was like, so you sat last night and thought about like my deficiencies? And I'm like, yeah, he did. He sat last night and thought about your deficiencies in order to make you better. So he was just like, but he had typed it, I guess, which was like really hit home that he put thought into this. And
man, just the investment of doing that.
Yeah. I didn't get it at first. He was trying to make me better. But then, after like 30 seconds, it clicked in and the ego left. And I was just like, oh, you're right. That's the type of person he was. He was, and the fact that one of the big things is he didn't have to do this, but as he's living in DC and getting pulled up to New York City, obviously to work on Bad Boy things, but to work on a bunch of things, outside of Bad Boy, because the Bad Boy producers were being spread around throughout the industry, doing a bunch of remixes, doing songs for people. He would make it a point that they would have to fly me, the record company would have to fly me up from DC along with him. So he's not only getting me a flight, but another hotel room. And again, this is when there were huge budgets for albums, but he was making that point of, I don't work without my engineer. So he was monumental in bringing me to New York early, in terms of the scene of meeting all the assistants, being at all the studios, watching, again, a Tony Maserati work, a Joe Quinby work, or, Prince Charles Alexander work, like all of those different people. I got to sit in because I'm in there with Chuck. And let alone, I haven't even touched on just what you learn musically from watching him work.
Because he played all the instruments and everything, right? Like he wasn't just sampling records. Like
play everything but wind instruments. He was a perfect combination of people that can sample and understand what sampling is, but also play by ear. Because of his go-go background too, it was just like he would mix a lot of different flavors together. So he had the hip hop in him, he had the go-go in him, he had the R&B in him. He had all of that. So it's like this perfect mix of like Teddy Riley, Herbie Lovebug, and pick your favorite New York producer. Right. So he had all of those things wrapped into one and knew very well how to tap into each of those at the given time.
So not only are you getting all of these different experiences in life and getting all these different influences and being able to like spread your roots into all these different areas and pull the nutrients out of all these different soils, but then you're seeing it in real life in an elder that's bringing all the things together and showing you what it looks like to be able to bring it to life and actually impact the entire game.
And to be able to, because of the fact that most of the bosses that I've had, or even just say people I've worked for throughout the music business, most of them are probably 4 years older than me at maximum. So that's still sort of a thing where, again, you got to drop this ego of someone relatively your age telling you what to do. And Chucky allowed me not only to do that from a boss standpoint, but also how to work for your friend. So you may get into a natural argument with your friend or have a difference of opinion with your friend, but you got to respect the space that it's his company and it's his movement and it's him that is the reason why you're here. So you at least get to state your opinion. But once Chucky says something and I had to go execute it, I think that foundation is what allowed me to work for Jay in that same way, where it's like, okay, you're 4 years older than me, but this is your thing. And we're going to go and I give you my opinion. It's almost like your lawyer, your doctor, sort of, I'm the expert at this particular thing. I'm going to give you these options. Now you get to choose what you want to do. And then once you say that, then you have me here for my expertise and I'm going to go do those things. That's key in foundation, because I feel like a lot of people can't work for somebody their own age or maybe even somebody younger than them just because of that position. So if it's me DJing for Alicia Keys and she's leading the way, Alicia Keys is actually younger than me, but in that situation, she's the actual boss or she's your client, however you want to put it. If you don't like the boss word, but that's really what it is. It's like,
this is her expression. It's her name on the thing. So like this is her artistic vision that you're helping to facilitate.
Yeah, and even if that person may be wrong in a particular choice, it's still their choice. It's their company, their expression, their song. It's their live show. It's their, it's those things.
And for it to be their thing, it's got to include their wrongness sometimes. And it's interesting, like just thinking about that, the preparedness to have somebody print out something like that and to have that moment that like, man, so when we were in the club, you're going through all this and we're hanging out. But that, the fact that it took you 30 seconds, it might take someone else 3 years. Yeah. And that comes from having been coached, and that comes from having been raised by strong men. And I don't know if you're ready to talk about this, and we don't have to include this, but you lost Chucky Thompson and your dad in a short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was devastating. It was on top of that in and of itself in a normal situation would be like almost too heavy for somebody. But it's coming in the middle, or Chucky was in the middle of the world shutting down. So imagine the mindset of this thing. Everything that I do to generate money is shut down right now, and it's supposed to be recession-proof. Like the thing that we do, entertainment, even in a recession, they say booze and one other, prostitution or whatever is supposed to be the thing that is recession-proof. So I think there's no live shows. There's no DJing gigs because there's no clubs open. There's no talking engagements. There's no people are making music, but they're not rushing to get it mixed and put it out. Like record companies pretty much just slowed down at that time. So it's already this reflection period of the world stopping. And then the dude that's my mentor, passes away, and it's just like I couldn't. I was stuck for a couple of days of not being able to move, and I couldn't really understand it. Um, just I wanted to figure out just why. You know what I mean? It's the whys that are really no answer to the why. Um, it was a bunch of survivor's guilt. It was a bunch of like, I'm actually happy that the last time that we stopped in DC, I made a point to go over there, and we like actually before he was working on the 444 tour had stopped there. No, not the 444. Everything is Love tour had stopped in DC. And he was working on a Go-Go documentary. So he was like, "Dude, can you come over and film something?" So it's actually our last interaction is documented. So that was like a special thing, but it was just like, I don't know, it was a heavy blow. And then for that to happen, and then for my father to pass, it was just, it was almost too heavy. And with my father passing, it was like, I already knew he was sick, but I just never, I always thought I had more time.
Yeah.
For that. And also too, being removed, my father being on the East Coast and being in Delaware. And for those 2 years of COVID, I was in LA. We were working on the J Electronica album and in LA. And his album release, what was supposed to be his album release party, was the first time that the company called us and said, "Look, we can't have all these people in the same room. Like COVID has gotten that serious that you can't even have like us as a people didn't know if they were legally liable." So literally the company called us and said, "We got to shut this down," sort of thing. So we didn't have those release parties. But being caught in LA, it was like, okay, now I got to get an apartment, and now I got to stay out here and basically be. So I was removed from it. My mother called me, and I was actually asleep in LA to tell me that it had happened. So, it kicks you into a different gear. It definitely lets you know that you're commander in chief at this point. Because my father was definitely the focal point of not only just my nucleus family, but the entire clan, sort of thing. He was the person that was solid and steady, same phone number since, 1979, 1980. That house is always there. If you needed your taxes done, he was that guy. He was just always, plenty of time people, I don't have money for this, money for that. He was the guy you would call. So, becoming commander in chief and have to take over. Okay, well, he was in the middle of taking care of this house in DC and this house in North Carolina. And now I got to go get death certificates, and I got to go show that I'm next to kin, and I got to take this over. And so the responsibilities came on top of the emotion, on top of, having some realizations. And this is one thing I will share. It was, and I mean this in a great way, that even in perfection, there may not be an angle that you see. So what I mean by that is that my father took care of everything to the point where my mother never had to ask, "Where's this bill? Where's that bill?" The light has never been cut off. But then when he goes and you don't know certain information, it's like, I should have at least included this person in what I was doing. So you start to see some of these things that even when we think we're in a perfect position, that there could be room for improvement. Because then my mom is like, "Okay, well, where's this piece of paper? What's the code to this? Where's the insurance papers? Where's the this?" It's like my father was that perfect person.
Yeah, man. Something else I wanted to ask about. Thank you so much for sharing that, man. I appreciate that. And it's such a major key to this whole reality. Um, and you've been so generous with your time. I got a million things that I could ask you about. Like we could do a series like this. You know what I mean? I would love to talk again at some point. But I'm curious. I want to jump to working with Hove, and there's so many periods in between there. But I want to jump to working with Hove, and so you've worked with so many artists, and you've worked with truly great artists. Like Rhapsody is truly great, Freeway is truly great. Like in the pantheon of people that we love in this culture, that this culture and this art form is not the same. We're not the same without them. There's a lot of them, and but then there's Jay-Z, and it's just different. You know what I mean? There's a lot of amazing comedians, and then there's George Carlin, and there's Dave Chappelle, and there's like so you've worked very intimately with a lot of these people. What is it about somebody like Hove that's different from the rest of these people that are absolute miracles? All these people are miracles, but there's something about somebody like a Jay-Z or a Beyonce that's different. what have you gleaned and observed that's transferable to us?
Um, that's a good question. I think with Jay is self-awareness, number one.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
Obviously him coming in a little older, and I mean into the industry a little older than the average age of when MCs sort of got in at that time period. You know, most people were late teens, early 20s, and to have your first album at 26, and to have lived that sort of life, I think made him very self-aware. Uh, so you understand like your purpose and where you want to go, because a lot of that is a prime example is say, you know, the trends start changing later and you see this auto tune thing come in, and most artists would say, okay, well that's the new trend and I need to do that. Being self-aware enough to say that doesn't fit me. You
that's
know,
not me. Or
yeah,
that's
that's
not
not
me.
me.
Right.
And you can look at that in different categories. So I think that self-awareness is there. Obviously, I'm skipping over the talent level because some people have the talent, but they don't know
Right.
how to absolutely apply the talent. So, you know, it's a given that the talent level is there. So the self-awareness, being able to pivot and move sonically as the times move, I think is an important part that adds on to the longevity, because certain artists just can't um, move beyond certain time periods or hearing music outside of their time period of when it was the hottest to them. Uh, that and having this demeanor of calmness, of being able to have a certain zen in all situations is something that I admire, because I don't always have that zen. I'm very much the, you know, if it start by, I may get to a yelling point, and I've never really seen him yell. I've never really seen him like get upset, and part of it may be, you know, the old school hustler mentality of just trying to keep your cool at all
Right.
times.
You have to constantly assess all of the angles and all the possibilities because you're dealing with your safety.
Absolutely. So I think those things add to it, but I think just on top of everything is making very informed choices, so that when you're editing yourself, you're saying, is this the best that I can be? Is this the way I'm
Mm.
supposed to go? Have I filled in all the holes? You know, he's very blatant with me about, hey, boo, if this was me in your barbershop, then yeah, I could give you just bars, 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 bars all day. And you would love it. That's who you are. That's your crowd. Your barbershop's gonna go ooh and ah, and we're gonna debate it and break them down. But he's like, I also understand, you know, and this is that famous line of I want to, you know, lyrically, if you know, if I could just be free, I would be Talib Kweli. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
Common and Pharaoh Monch and
But
like,
I ain't been, you know what I'm saying? But I ain't been common sense. You know, like so those sort of things are conscious decisions
mhm.
that um and that taught me lessons that, you know, there may be songs that H to the Izzo is probably not one of my favorite songs. I may not pick that song, but I understood exactly what that was going to do in the world. So I understand that it's a sing-along song. I understand that kids are going to gravitate towards it. I understand that, you know, there may be advertising campaigns that can use that record. It's having that balance of knowing when to not over rap the song and to
Mhm.
let the song be the song. And the importance is the vibration of the song more than somebody saying this is the illest verse that I've ever heard. So
Right.
yes, you get really well constructed verses, but if it
Mhm.
starts taking away from the feel, it's sort of like the same argument that funk artists would have with jazz artists. And it was
Right.
like where a jazz artist is doing these super complicated movements.
But like, yeah, but okay, who's dancing to that?
Who's dancing to that? Who feels that? Are we stopping to watch you do that versus us feeling funk?
Mhm.
And the thing of jazz artists looking at funk artists and being like, well, that's simple. You're only using 3 chords. And it's like, but look at how the crowd
You're
moves.
you're playing the same riff for an hour. Like, come on, man, can we please? Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So that sort of thing is an understanding. I think that he has song wise of picking songs and knowing where to go with that. And still, it's almost like when LL had that skill of knowing that my audience is this and I'm catering to the ladies on every album. I'm going to remind you that I can really
Right.
rap. I'm going to give you 4 3 2 1 on one album just to
That's
show you,
right.
you know what I mean? I'm still in that space. Or
And
on
if
an
I go too far, I'm gonna give you Mama Said Knock You Out.
yeah, yeah,
'Cause then he came back with a whole album that's like, "Hey, no, 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 now, like, yeah,
absolutely. You know, the I Shot Yous on his albums are the ones that are just like, don't forget that I can really rap. So
yeah."
I think that's, again, a long-winded way of saying that these are key things that I think are conscious things that Hov does that adds to the reason why he is who he is.
Yeah. And that's why I get back to the, like, his being able to explore and being able to push things in directions that some of us would be like, we might not understand at the time. That, like, he's making, like, this verse is also going to be a hook. And I didn't realize that until some of those songs were played in a club. And I'm like, oh, all the girls and the white people in here are singing along with the verse the same way they sang along with the hook.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the verse is just basically another hook almost. You know what I'm
So
saying?
we put these things that we call them tricks, but it's
Mm.
really crowd participation. So again,
It's about to go down.
exactly. Oh, and I wish I never met her at all. That
Yeah.
those things are no. I'm not trying to over rap the song. I purposely put this part in there for you to sing along with.
It's a sing along moment.
Not only in the club that's going to be attractive, but also in the show is going to be attractive. So
Mhm.
that's what he would title dumbing it down, and I think people got offended when they used that particular term of saying dumbing it down. It's that we're trying to be less complicated, or to say it in a Lil Wayne version where he said, well, if you know what I'm saying, if I'm too simple, then y'all don't understand the basics. You know,
Mhm.
like,
Right.
Wayne is saying the same thing. I could rap on this complex level, but sometimes I'm bringing it to this level. Or, the difference between Andre 3000 and Big Boy. Sometimes you need Big Boy to ground
Mhm.
the outer space things that Andre 3000 is talking about.
Mhm. And you see not only the evolution of an artist, like, all of those things are still very rooted in art.
Yeah.
He just is an artist, and so everything that he does will still be artistic. And there are some times where, like, the music wasn't my favorite. Like, Justify My Thug musically is not my favorite, but there's verses on there. There's lines in that song that still, with me as a grown man, I still think to myself, I'll tighten my belt before I ask for help. Foolish pride is what held me together through the years I never felt, which is why I never played myself. I just played a hand 'em down. Like, I live by those things. Those are in my head with the Quran and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
But so, like, we've seen this man, like, not only show us so much artistically, but show us so much as a human.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But there are chambers both musically and in terms of, like, what the message was. So, like, I think me and you come from a similar place where it's like we probably are more radical than, so, like, black capitalism might not resonate with us immediately. I don't know if that's the same, but I'm assuming like, with the conversation me and you had about Du Bois recently, I'm like, we might be in a similar place there. And there was a period where it felt like that's where he was at. And so I'm wondering, for you, both musically and also the message, are there ever times where you're feeling particularly, because it feels like there's always a conversation between you all going on that's showing up in the work.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, if he's getting on a certain type of thing too much, it's like you being in the room will balance it and ground it so that it's still going to translate, like you being a translator. Are there times where you ever have tension with that though?
No, we don't necessarily have tension because, well, now I'll say three things. Number one is I understand that I'm there to help facilitate his expression. If it
Yes,
was
sir.
me saying my raps, then it may, there's going to be, I didn't sell drugs. I didn't do, you know what I'm saying? We may
Right.
have a difference of opinion on certain small things, but I'm helping the artist become the best them. And it's not what I think they should be. It's helping them be the best them, number one. Number two is that when we have these long discussions about those particular topics, and let's take, like, say, capitalism, for instance, where you start to see another side of it as to where you see someone who does actually get money, but I see the things that he does with the money. And so
Mhm.
some of the critiques that happen at a holistic level of capitalism, I start to see the intricacies of it and how you can start to use that for good. And then you start to redefine what your critique of a certain thing, and you come to figure out that it's like no matter what system we're in, right? Socialism, capitalism, communism, we can show examples across the world to where the unrighteousness of the person running it is what really is determining why that system runs the way that it runs. If that makes sense to you. So
Mhm.
I start to see where it's just like he doesn't report on it, or he may not always say it about him giving away so much money to all these different organizations. It doesn't necessarily have to even be a charity. It could be a thing where
Right.
you're just giving it away, or if something happens, he's the person that can automatically make something move. or
Yeah.
starting foundations or starting schools and things. It's things that
Hmm.
he never, really talks about. Um, and then I guess those extra things that I see are based off of long conversations that we
Hmm. Yeah, man. I mean, you've been so generous with your time, brother. And I actually have I got a VIP meet and greet of my own around the corner in about 3 minutes. But man, I just have to say, man, on behalf really of myself, but also just of the culture, man, you know, without you playing the role that you've played and being the person that you are, not only with Hove, but with so many others, man, like I can't imagine where we would be. The people, it's really easy to take shots at somebody like Jay. But imagine where we would be if we didn't have somebody like that in the position that he's in. You know what
right.
I mean? Like, I think we would be incredibly lost. Like, the fact that he still is the standard by which everybody needs to be checked and needs to be measured. Um, I don't think there's another argument other than him being the greatest of all time. You can argue about who you love and who you appreciate and admire and things like that. But the role that you've played in that, and then also, you know, in the culture and with so many of us, man, like we're deeply indebted to you and deeply grateful to you and for you and to your family and to your community and to all your mentors and to all of the people that have loved you and poured into you and cared for you and trained you and taught you and prepared you. It really means a lot, man. And I'm really grateful for you taking the time to talk.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you, man. I appreciate your music, your work too.
All right, family. Thank you so much, man.
All right, my man. Have a good day.
Peace, you too. Special thanks to the great young guru for being so generous with his time and his insight and his stories. He's a really, really busy person. Guru is always in demand. And then, so not only was he busy at this time, but you can hear at the end of the podcast that I had to jump out of this. And I was at an Airbnb when we recorded this, just about 2 blocks from my 2 sold out Minneapolis shows with early VIP meet and greets. So I jumped up from the chair doing this interview, sprinted around the corner, and got over there just in time for my meet and greets. And I actually left it recording. That's how quick I jumped up. I left this joint recording. So when I went back to listen to it, I can hear myself grabbing my keys and putting on my shoes and washing my hands and brushing my teeth and running out the door. You know what I'm saying, to go to that. So just very grateful that me and Young Guru were able to get this conversation in. And thank you for listening. Go to brotherali.com and sign the mailing list. That's how you know what's going on with us. Go to the section called Join and Get Down with the Caravan. That's where people can interact and support on another level. We just did a limited vinyl drop, and those things sell out. There's only 500 pieces. Those things sell out, and people get mad because they want to have them. And the Caravan members actually got a chance to order those early because of their support. And the top tier Caravan members are called Trailblazers. Those people actually got the record early as a straight up gift just for all their support since we've been doing this. Also, that top tier has access to a Slack channel. Like, we're members of a private Slack channel where we record and leave each other voice notes. Sometimes I give prompts for a conversation just to spark conversation in people from really different walks of life that would not know each other otherwise are sharing our reflections, our experiences, just checking in with each other. And it's a really, really beautiful experience. So head to brotherali.com, sign the mailing list, go to the section called Join, Get Down with the Caravan. Thank you for listening to the podcast. You know what I'm saying? Make sure to like and share and comment and subscribe. All of that, rate it. All of that good stuff helps spread the word about the podcast. Special thanks to Zakat Foundation, to BetterHelp. Of course, our link there is betterhelp.com/travelers. You can get down with the therapy journey over there if that makes sense for you. Special thanks to Amna Mirza, to Mansour Panawala, to Darian Washington, to DJ Last Word, to Mark from Medina, to Ant, to Ida Rashid, to Shane Atkinson, to Rami Neshashibi and Sadia Nawab. Thank you to everybody that contributes to this podcast. Even the people that just hit me up and tell me what they like about it. You know what I'm saying? We're very, very grateful and appreciative to you all. Travelers Podcast is produced by Brendan Kelly, aka BK1, and it's a production of Travelers Media Incorporated. We love you. We appreciate you. and we wish you well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.